If you've ever driven late at night and caught something in the corner of your eye, a shadow, a figure, a flash of white, this story will ruin every lonely road for you. Because what I saw wasn't a trick of the light. It wasn't exhaustion. It wasn't imagination. It was real. It was alive. And it wanted me to stop the car. You'll understand why I'll never stop for anything on the roadside again. I should start by telling you that I've driven that stretch of highway dozens of times. It's a long, open road cutting through miles of forest, with only a thin metal guardrail separating drivers from a steep drop into trees and rock below. Nothing unusual ever happens there. No accidents, no strange wildlife, nothing. At least, that's what I believed before last winter, before something stepped out from behind that guardrail and changed the way I see the world forever. It was late, close to 1 a.m., and snow had begun layering the asphalt in thin, glittering sheets. My wipers scraped across the windshield rhythmically, brushing away white flakes that made it difficult to see. I was 4 hours into the drive, heading home after visiting friends. I wasn't tired, but I was settling into that trance-like state long-distance drivers know. The drone of tires, the low hum of the heater, the monotony of the white lines rushing beneath my car. It all lulled me into a strange calm. Then something flickered in the corner of my vision. A shadow, small at first, then stretching taller as I approached. I slowed automatically, instinct kicking in. Maybe it was a deer, or some animal caught in the snowfall. My eyes narrowed, trying to make out the shape through the glare of snow-covered pavement. That's when I saw it. A human figure, standing perfectly still, half hidden behind the guardrail. I lifted my foot slightly off the gas, but didn't brake. Whoever they weren't waving, weren't asking for help. They weren't even facing the road. They stood sideways, facing the forest, one hand resting on the guardrail, as if preparing to climb over. Their posture was wrong, too stiff, too rigid. As I got closer, the headlights finally washed over them. They were wearing a thin, pale shirt. No jacket, no coat, nothing suited for freezing weather. Their skin looked gray, stretched tightly over bones. Their hair clung to their scalp in long, stringy clumps as if wet, though no rain had fallen for days. And their face, they didn't have one. I don't mean it was blurry or shadowed. I mean there was nothing. No mouth, no nose, no eyes. Just a smooth, sagging surface where human features should have been. I slammed my foot on the brake. The car skidded across the snowy road, fishtailing slightly as the figure tilted its head toward me, slowly, painfully like bones grinding. I froze. The faceless thing didn't move at first. It just stood with its head twisted at an unnatural angle, body half-turned, as though trying to understand what I was. Then it took a step forward. I screamed. It was pure instinct, a burst of panic ripping from my chest. My hands gripped the wheel so tightly, I felt my nails pressing into my palms. The thing took another step, then another. Each movement was jerky and wrong, limbs bending as if they were hinged in the wrong places. I hit the gas. Hard. The car lurched, tires fighting for traction on the snow. The headlights flickered once, dimming as though the cold night was swallowing their light. But the car surged forward, and I sped away, heart thundering, breath ragged. I didn't look back. Not for miles. When I finally forced myself to glance at the rearview mirror, nothing was there except swirling snow and darkness. My body relaxed slightly, tension draining from my shoulders. Maybe, just maybe, I'd hallucinated it. Snow can do strange things to shadows. Exhaustion can trick the mind. Yeah, that had to be it. I repeated it out loud, trying to believe it. That wasn't real. It wasn't real. But a few minutes later, as I rounded a curve, my headlights washed over something else, something that made my blood turn to ice. Footprints. Bare footprints. Trailing across the snow, leading from the forest straight toward the guardrail. Exactly where I'd seen the thing. My stomach lurched. My throat tightened. I drove faster, eyes flicking between the road and the trees that seemed to press closer and closer to the highway. Every shadow between them suddenly looked like a figure. Every cluster of branches looked like hands reaching out. Just when I thought my racing thoughts might slow down, movement flashed beside me. On the right side of the road, running alongside my car. I swore loudly, jerking the wheel slightly. Through the swirl of snow, a shape kept pace with me, sliding effortlessly through the trees, its limbs long and angular, too long to be human. It moved without sound, without struggle, like it was gliding. I pressed harder on the gas pedal, pushing the engine until it roared. The speedometer climbed, but the shape didn't fall behind. Its head turned toward me, its blank face glowing faintly under the moonlight filtering through the trees. That was when I realized something. It wasn't running. The forest was moving around it. Branches pulled back like curtains as it drifted through, snow falling around its body but never landing on it. My breath hitched. I couldn't keep looking at it. If I did, I thought something would break inside my mind. I forced my focus onto the road and drove faster than I ever had in my life. But the forest didn't end. The shape didn't disappear. The highway stretched dark and endless ahead. I had to do something, anything, to break the nightmare. I flicked on my high beams, hoping the sudden brightness might scare the thing or at least reveal its form more clearly. Instead, the lights caught something else. Another figure, standing in the middle of the road. Not the same faceless shape. This one was small, curled, shivering, child-sized. A little girl. She stood barefoot in the snow, wearing a torn dress soaked in frost. Her hair hung in wet clumps around her face. Her arms wrapped around her chest like she was freezing, and her head tilted slowly, almost gently, as she looked at the oncoming car. I yanked the wheel. The car swerved violently. Tires screamed. Snow sprayed upward in white bursts. For a second, the world spun, headlights dancing across trees and shadows and sky, until the car slid sideways and slammed into a snowbank. The airbag exploded into my face. My vision blurred. My ears rang. When I could finally lift my head, dazed and breathless, the world outside my windshield was still, silent. No girl, no faceless shape, nothing, just snow and trees. I sat there for minutes, maybe longer, breathing hard, head pounding, trying to process what had happened. After the shock faded, I forced myself out of the car. The cold slapped me instantly, numbing my fingers until they burned. I walked slowly around the car, scanning the road. No footprints except mine. No child. No distorted, gliding shape in the trees. Maybe the crash had knocked my senses loose. Maybe I was concussed. Maybe this was all a horrible dream, sparked by exhaustion and icy roads. I convinced myself of that. I forced myself to. But then I noticed something that made my heart stop. On the passenger side window, smeared across the glass, were fingerprints. Tiny ones, children-sized, pressed from the outside. 5 perfect prints, clear as day despite the frost. I stumbled back, lungs spasming, vision tunneling. The cold felt suffocating. The forest seemed to lean closer, listening. I've never told anyone this story in full. Whenever I've tried, people interrupt or laugh or assume I'm exaggerating. But I know what I saw. I know what followed me. And I know what I narrowly escaped. If escape is even the right word. This happened 2 years ago, but the memory is as sharp as the day it happened. It begins on a long stretch of highway I'd driven hundreds of times, and in somewhere far darker, somewhere I don't think I'll ever fully return from. Let me start the only place I can, exit 49. The exit itself is nothing special. It veers off into a rural service road with a small gas station, a flickering streetlight, and a diner that always looked like it belonged in a photograph from the 1980s. Before that night, I had never once taken it. I never had a reason. The route I usually took home was straight, familiar, predictable. But that night, something strange happened. My radio died, even though the car was new. Then my phone glitched out, screen flashing white before going black. The headlights dimmed for a second, then brightened again. The check engine light blinked on, then off. Everything in the car felt off, like I had driven through a pocket of static. And then a sign appeared on the road shoulder that made me slow down. Take exit 49. Now, a handmade sign. White cardboard. Black lettering. Staked directly into the gravel. At first I thought it was a prank. But then another appeared 20 feet later. Turn right. Do not ignore. Then another. You are in danger. I felt something cold slide down my spine. My first instinct was to keep driving, but something deeper, older, warned me this wasn't one of those things you should ignore. I took exit 49. The ramp curved sharply, more sharply than any exit I'd ever taken. My tires gripped the road as the car dipped onto the narrow two-lane road beyond. The gas station loomed on the left, bathed in the sickly yellow glow of the flickering streetlight. The diner sat across from it, dark and empty. But someone was standing under the streetlight. A man, tall, thin, too thin, wearing a wrinkled gray suit with pants that were slightly too short, exposing pale ankles. His shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, tie hanging loose like it had been tugged repeatedly. He had no coat, even though the night was freezing, and he was staring directly at me, not moving, not blinking, just staring. I slowed the car, unsure if he needed help. His clothes didn't look homeless, but they didn't look clean either. Everything about him felt wrong, out of place, like he'd walked out of a place where people don't move quite right. As I rolled closer, his face came into the beam of my headlights. I wish it hadn't. He wasn't blinking, not even a twitch. His eyes were wide, bloodshot, and seemed to glisten unnaturally under the light. His pupils were enormous, too large, and his mouth hung slightly open, as though he'd forgotten how to close it. He didn't look scared, or angry, or confused. He looked aware, too aware, like he knew something I didn't. I rolled my window down a few inches. "Hey, are you okay?" I called out. He didn't respond. His head didn't tilt. His eyes didn't move. He simply stared, unblinking. I swallowed, suddenly uneasy. "Do you need help?" Nothing. His gaze didn't even flicker. I felt something shift in the air. A heaviness, as though the night itself were holding its breath. Then his jaw dropped further. Not naturally, not gradually. It unhinged sharply, too fast, opening twice as wide as any human mouth should. His eyes didn't change, but his voice came out low, crackling, layered with something that sounded like static and whispers all at once. "Get back on the highway." I froze. He wasn't yelling. He wasn't speaking normally. It was like his voice was being forced through him by something else. Something using his mouth like a speaker. "Sir, what?" I whispered. His jaw snapped shut instantly. Then he blinked. Once. Only once. But it looked like it hurt him. His whole body twitched when he did it. I rolled the window up without thinking and started to drive past him, but as I did, his head rotated. Not turned. Rotated. Smoothly. Like a surveillance camera tracking motion. His neck didn't twist. His spine didn't adjust. His entire skull simply pivoted to follow me. My heart pounded so hard I felt it in my throat. I pressed harder on the gas. The road leading away from the exit was darker than it should have been. The trees looked wrong, too tall, too thin, branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. I kept glancing at the rearview mirror, half expecting to see the man running after me. But the road behind me was empty. Then something flickered in the mirror. For a split second, I saw the man's reflection sitting in my back seat. I screamed and jerked the steering wheel. The car swerved violently. I caught control just before I would have plunged into a ditch. My breath was coming fast, too fast, and the mirror showed only darkness behind me. I needed to leave. Immediately. But the road stretched on endlessly, winding deeper into the trees instead of leading back to the main highway. My GPS showed nothing. My phone was dead. My radio was nothing but static. Then the static sharpened. It shifted. It whispered, "Don't blink." I slammed my hand against the radio, shutting it off. My knuckles went white around the steering wheel. The road narrowed, the trees closing in on both sides. My headlights felt like the only thing keeping the night from swallowing me whole. And that's when I saw him again, standing in the middle of the road. Same suit, same wide eyes, same unblinking stare. I hit the brakes hard, skidding across the asphalt. The man didn't flinch, didn't move, didn't react at all to the car barreling toward him. I stopped less than 5 feet in front of him. My breath fogged the glass. My fingers trembled. His eyes were impossibly wide now, almost bulging. His pupils swallowed nearly all the color, black and slick like tar. His mouth crept open slowly, no longer unhinging unnaturally, just stretching wider and wider like something inside wanted out. The car was idling loudly. I could feel the vibration under my legs, could smell the faint hint of oil and cold metal. And then he spoke again. Only this time, both his voice and another voice came out with it. You shouldn't have stopped. The second voice wasn't human. It wasn't whispering. It wasn't loud. It was layered, like a dozen low tones speaking in unison, vibrating through my bones instead of my ears. Before I could react, the man took one slow, jerky step toward the car and blinked once. But this time, when he blinked, the world around me flickered like a glitch in a video file. The trees warped. The sky turned black, like pitch black, void black gone black. Another blink. The trees were closer, leaning over the road. Another blink. The man was now pressed against my windshield, hand splayed, face smashed against the glass. His eyes were inches from mine, still wide open, still unblinking. He smiled. I didn't think twice. I floored the accelerator. The car roared forward. The man rolled up onto the hood, then vanished over the roof. I didn't care if I hit him. I didn't care about anything except getting away. The engine screamed as I sped blind down the narrowing road. My heart hammered so violently my vision shook. But after only a minute, I realized something horrifying. There were no intersections, no driveways, no turns, no signs, no houses, nothing. Just trees, darkness, and a road I no longer trusted. I drove faster, and that was when the blinking started again. Not mine. I've convinced myself for years that what happened wasn't real, that it was just sleep deprivation, paranoia, or some kind of prolonged mental breakdown. But every time I wake up at 3:17 a.m., gasping and drenched in sweat, I remember the truth. There really was a man standing outside my bedroom window. Not once, not twice, but for weeks. And he wasn't human. I didn't know that at first, though. Back then, I was just a broke university student in a terrible off-campus apartment with thin walls, black mold, and a landlord who never answered calls. The place was old, 1950s construction, and had this strange, heavy feeling everywhere, like the house exhaled slowly and you were never alone inside it. I moved in because it was cheap, and because I thought I could handle cheap. I had no idea what I was living next to. My window had no bars, no lock, nothing. Just a thin panel of glass that separated my bed from the backyard. The backyard itself was huge, overgrown, and fenced by tall, rotting boards that looked like they would collapse in a strong breeze. The first night, I heard it, a soft tapping. Tap, tap, tap. I was half asleep and assumed it was tree branches. I didn't even open my eyes. But then it got louder. Tap, tap, tap. It was rhythmic, deliberate. I shot awake and looked toward my window. The curtains were closed, but I could see the silhouette of a hand pressing against the fabric from the outside. I froze. I didn't breathe. I didn't move. The hand stayed there for maybe 15 seconds, long enough for my heart to slam, so hard I thought I would faint. Then it slid downward and disappeared. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. By morning, I convinced myself it had been a dream. It was easier than the alternative, that someone had been standing inches from my face while I slept. For several days, nothing happened. I returned to my part-time job stocking shelves at a grocery store. I studied for exams. I ignored the uncomfortable feeling that someone was always watching. Then, a week after the tapping, it escalated. This time it was scratching. SSSSSSCRRRTCH. Long fingernails dragging across the glass. Slowly. Purposefully. It was 2:48 a.m. I forced myself to look. Just a peek. Just enough to calm the panic. I lifted the curtain half an inch. There was an eye staring back at me. Not wide, not crazed, just staring. Watching. Waiting. It was pale gray in color. Almost milky. The pupil didn't look right either. It was too big and oddly shaped, like a droplet of ink suspended in water. I yelped. My knees buckled. I fell backward off the bed. When I got up again, the eye was gone. I didn't go near the window until daylight. When the sun finally rose, I ventured outside. My hands shook the entire time. I felt ridiculous, like a child afraid of monsters, but I had to check. I found scratch marks on the window, Not like fingernails, more like claws. 4 deep gouges, each about 6 inches long. I called my landlord. He told me it was probably raccoons. Raccoons do not stand upright and stare into your window at 3 a.m. 2 nights later, I met my next-door neighbor, an old woman named Mrs. Hayworth. She lived alone and rarely spoke to anyone. I would see her sometimes in her yard feeding stray cats or watering dead plants. She always looked tired, haunted, like she hadn't slept in years. That evening, she stopped me as I was unlocking my door. Her voice shook. "You shouldn't stay here," she whispered. I laughed nervously. "Trust me, I wish I could move." "No," she said firmly. "You don't understand. He always comes back." That made my blood run cold. "Who?" I asked. She stared past me, at my bedroom window. "The man who waits," she whispered. "Do not look directly at him. Do not speak to him. And whatever you do," she lowered her voice to a trembling hiss, "never open the window." I stood frozen, key still in my hand. "Have you seen him?" I managed to ask. She hesitated, then nodded. "He used to stand at my window too, back when I was your age." She turned and walked back toward her house without another word. That night, I pushed my dresser against the window. For a few nights, things were quiet. I kept my headphones on while sleeping, playing white noise to drown out any sound. My heart still raced every time the wind blew, but nothing happened. Then came the whispering, soft at first, like someone exhaling directly into my ear. Then clearer, a voice outside my window, calling my name. "Isaac." I froze. My headphones were still on. The white noise was playing, but the voice was underneath the sound, inside of it, almost like it was using the static as a channel. "Isaac, come to the window." I pulled the headphones off. The whisper didn't stop. It got louder. "Isaac, open the window." The voice was deep, raspy, unnatural, like someone trying to mimic a human voice, but getting the tone wrong. I dropped to the floor, pressed my back against the bed, and covered my ears. But the voice seeped through anyway. It vibrated in my skull. "Open the window." I don't know how long I sat there. Eventually, I passed out from exhaustion. At this point, I should have left. I should have packed a bag and walked out without looking back. But rent was cheap, and I had nowhere else to go. So I told myself that maybe I was hallucinating. Maybe stress was getting to me. Then the footsteps began. Not outside the window, not on the stairs, but directly above my bedroom. Slow, heavy, thump, thump, thump. Someone, or something, was moving in the attic. The problem? My house didn't have an attic. At least, not one I knew about. There was no access door, no hatch, nothing. Yet the footsteps continued, usually around 3 a.m., always moving slowly from one side of the ceiling to the other. Sometimes I would hear breathing too, harsh, labored, like whatever was up there struggled to inhale. One night, something fell, a loud, heavy object crashing to the floor above. Dust drifted down from the ceiling. That was the moment I realized. It wasn't just visiting the window anymore. It was inside the house. I slept with the lights on after that. But sleep didn't help. One night, around 4 a.m., I saw it. A shadow under my bedroom door. Someone was standing in the hallway, perfectly still, just outside my room. The shadow didn't move for several minutes. My eyes burned for not blinking. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the shadow slowly moved away. But instead of walking down the hall, the shadow rose upward, stretching unnaturally long and thin until it reached the top of the door. Like something was climbing the wall. I cried silently. I didn't move until sunrise. When I finally opened the door, the hallway was empty. But I saw long scratch marks on the walls leading upward toward the ceiling. The next day, I went to check on Mrs. Hayworth. Her door was open. Not wide, just cracked. "Hello." I called. No answer. I pushed it open gently. The house was eerily silent. Then I saw her. She was sitting in her armchair, facing the window. Her eyes were open. Her hands rested on her lap. She wasn't breathing. She wasn't moving. She was dead. Her face was twisted in terror, as if she died mid-scream. I backed away, hands shaking, and ran outside to call 911. When paramedics arrived, they said it looked like a heart attack. But I had seen the marks around her window. Scratches, just like mine. The man had visited her again, and this time He didn't leave. The final night in that house started normally. As normal as life could be when you're being stalked by something not human.